Hi, my name is Emma Choplin, and I'll be talking about choosing Apposite psychological science for public consumption. As scientists and researchers, I feel like we all have the same sentiment that the song I Want You to Want Me by Cheap Trick. My favorite version is the 1977 version that's live in Japan, and in front of the whole crowd, he goes, "I want you to want me." And then he goes into the lines later, "I need you to need me." And I feel like this captures the science community because a lot of us got into the game wanting to be a benefit for society and make this world a better place. We want to disseminate, but the most widely used approaches like publishing in journals, conferences, stakeholder panels, focus groups, etc., though highly incentivized, do not reach high volumes of the non-research audience. Youth at risk, concerned family and friends, help-seeking youth, rural clinicians, teachers, after-school care workers, school counselors, coaches, religious leaders, social workers, etc. These are people who most likely will not be paying a fee to read a journal and will not be somebody at one of these conferences, and only a select few can make it onto those focus groups and stakeholder panels. So, okay, these are the people we want to reach, but how do we reach them? Because I know a lot of people will start a blog or they'll have really great resources on their websites, but unfortunately, when somebody is looking for answers and they go to Google, those pages are not going to pop up on the first page. Or they don't know how to ask questions to get to the resources that they need. And so we have to think to ourselves, what does the public want right now? What do they need right now? And how can we capture their attentions? Because we ultimately know we have something very valuable to offer them, and we want them to want what we have to say. And we really need them to listen to us and take in what we have to say, because we feel like it will make a difference and it will improve their well-being. So what do we do? Now, it seems very simple. And the song also came out in the 70s, 1975, but the OJs had somewhat of a social justice song called "Give the People What They Want." And one of the lyrics goes, "You got to give the people now, give the people what they want." But what does society want that the psych community can offer right now? And another line says, "But I done been all over the world and everybody feels the same. It's a unanimous decision. I said they're ready for a change." Us scientists and us researchers, we want a change. We want to have a voice in this change. We want to make this place a better place. And so one survey in 2018 surveyed 210 dissemination and implementation researchers, these people who had received professional training in dissemination and implementation. And 56% of those scientists strongly agreed that it was an obligation to share research with those who need to learn about it. It's a unanimous decision here. We all want there to be change in this world, and we're ready for that change, right? So the next line says, "Well, it's about time for things to get better. We want the truth and no more lies. We want freedom, justice, and equality. And I want it for you, and I want it for me." Now this, you can read a lot in between the lines and the context that I'm speaking about right now. We've seen a lot of misinformation during this pandemic, spreading of misinformation, and sometimes, partial truths and flashy news headings that might be about like one science article, but obviously it wasn't from a systematic review or a Cochrane or something of that caliber. But people want the truth. And how do we give them the truth? And at the same time, they're seeking these things because they want freedom and options. So it's easy to access and something that they don't have to dig for or have to go through so much misinformation or confusing jargon to get to what is well needed. And I can equate this to missions of people going to like Africa and trying to make sure that everybody has access to water, because that is a basic human right to have access to water. Well, I think that having access to psychological science should also be a basic right, and should it be something that is hard for somebody outside the academic community or anybody to find those answers. So how do we give the people what they want and make it easy for them? To mitigate those previously mentioned barriers to accessing psychological science, HGAPS has become an early adopter of science communication using Wikiversity, which is the sister site of Wikipedia. It also makes it so where we can put information that might not be encyclopedic in nature, but more so informative and in lines with journal articles on Wikiversity, and then we can link them to Wikipedia pages that do get more traffic flow as external links and as an icon where they can go and view those pages. One of the examples that we did this with is telepsychology. I'm going to use an example of how HGAPS, through this pandemic, sought to give the people what they wanted in this time of need. So, gauging what the public wants and needs. There's multiple different ways to do this. Like a lot of you folks might know, during the pandemic, a lot of people who were seeking care with clinicians were no longer able to go in and receive therapy and treatment because of COVID and a lot of other restrictions. And so a lot of services were moved to online through telehealth, and then slowly but surely, and insurances started to cover that. And then, because of the stresses of the pandemic, more people were needing support, were seeking to improve their mental and emotional well-being by going and trying to find therapy online. I'm going to show you right here. This is from Google Trends, and a way for us to gauge what people want. So this is interest over time, so interest over 12 months. And 100% is the all-time high of how popular this term was being searched. And if you see here, this is before COVID-19 had become a problem for us in the United States. And you're seeing, not that much. It's not like it didn't exist before. But look here. This is really where it starts to pick up. All-time high between March 15th and the 21st. And slowly but surely, it starts, moving on. And then look at where everybody who is searching these terms are popping up. Florida, it was an epicenter. California, epicenter. Texas, epicenter. North Carolina, also a lot of hits. It's no surprise to me, and especially New York. I didn't know this, but Dr. Van Meter, who led this project, said that in New York, it's very hard to get care or specialists in clinical psychology attached to patients that need it because of distance and limited providers. And so telepsychology is a great way to get people who might be 2 hours away from a certain clinician able to see that clinician. So I thought this was really interesting and kind of shows the point here. But a term that more people are even familiar with is teletherapy. But look here. So not much going on. And boop, 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 boop. Look at this. All-time high and remaining to be elevated even afterwards here. And look at it. Everywhere, everybody is looking for teletherapy. So this to me is something that this is what people want, and this is something psychological science can be able to provide for these people. So how did we go about doing this? So led by the beautiful Dr. Anna Van Meter, and also her research assistant right now, Ellen Anderson, and then I also got to help. We made, using APA's telepsychology guide and other resources, and we crowdsourced a lot of information, not only for clinicians, but patients. Clinicians seeking to give telepsychology, so assessment and therapy via the internet and online, and then patients seeking that treatment and assessment online. So do you remember those dates? It really sparked between March 21st and the 28th, and then stayed elevated. Well, our first page we made was created March 21st. And now I'm going to show you what that page looks like. And we had multiple people contribute to this. I'm going to scroll down to one of my favorite pictures here. So we had people in upper level psychology class at UNC create infographics based on information provided by clinicians on things that would be helpful for other clinicians on trying to plan and get their patients ready. And so here's some more infographics that they could easily download and send out to people. And we even provide resources from other clinicians and things like that. So, and this is basically, all of this is a list of other resources and citations for, couples therapy, assessment, substance use disorder, on and on and on. Very rich. And the best part is this is updatable and anybody can go in and edit it, but we will be able to monitor, and there's bots that make sure that only things that are of a certain caliber stick. So about a month later, in May, we made a telepsychology guide for patients because these are other people who are searching for answers and help during this time. And so we provide resources for how they can find a therapist. We also provided what to do to prepare for a telepsychology session, mental health resources, because, it's not just therapy via Zoom. They can also do online group chats. There are suicide hotlines and even group chats of people. So like for DBT and things like that. So we really break it down for them. We even put a lot of insurance questions and links to that people might have surrounding can they afford or be able to experience clinical telepsychology. Page views. Let's look at, and I'm going to just show you how big of an impact we were actually able to make and reach people. And so this right here is showing how many people we were able to actually view in total of those combined pages since conception of them. 33,325. This is making a difference, and it's a free and open access and always growing resource for people. Now, this is just an example, a recent example of what we've been able to do. Okay, switching gears a little bit here. Now, this is a throwback to a project that I led when I was here at UNC, where I led a group that created content related to our evidence-based assessment project and pages, where we added a new vignette based off of and about Hannah Baker from 13 Reasons Why on Netflix, which has been strongly covered in the news and talked about in the clinical and academic community, and really received a lot of backlash from parents, youth sensitive to certain content, and as I previously mentioned, clinicians and researchers for the way that they romanticized suicide, covered topics like self-harm, sexual assault, and other mental health issues that youth in high school face. Though this is a throwback project, it still pops up in the news and even was trending on Twitter back in February or March when a new season was released, and a lot of people were spending more time on Netflix due to extra time given to them during the pandemic. So my team wanted to make a clinical vignette breaking down the psyche, the events, and the lack of treatment or professional help that Hannah Baker received before the infamous bathtub scene where she ended up taking her own life. Some of the complaints that came from mental health professionals were the lack of resources or quality of resources Netflix would provide after episodes, the unprofessional trigger warnings that they had in the beginning, and the way that things were being depicted in the show. What corresponded with the release of the show is an astronomical spike in how to kill yourself, suicidal method, searches, and other information connected to the show, such as depression. What is even more scary is that when you search for these things, it's not always providing you with information that helps the youth, but more so puts that youth in danger, which really motivated our team to make sure that we collected information from APS, APA, clinical listservs that were talking about what we wish viewers knew that Netflix fails to mention, and providing psychoeducation surrounding the topics covered in the show. We also made another page along with Appalachian State called 13 Reasons Why, What We Wish They Knew, where we break down every episode, certain topics talked about, and provide resources and information supported by mental health professionals. As dark as this is, and as dire as the situation presented itself as, we decided to use this as an opportunity for open teaching of psychological science, providing mental health first aid, and to be a beneficial outlet for clinicians, mental health professionals, and researchers to provide psychological science as an alternative to a Facebook rant or a post on a blog that these help-seeking youth may never come across. We also made infographics covering topics that would be beneficial for people that come across our page. What we would do to make sure that our content would pop up on the first page when people search for our pages is by linking them and writing content related to the criticism that mental health providers had about the show on Wikipedia about Hannah Baker and 13 Reasons Why, which would then lead people who maybe had those certain concerns to our page to receive verified information and resources that are backed by clinicians. I myself, along with Hannah Nettles, who was also on our team, and later other people in our group, received mental health first aid training where we learned about how to help people with mental illness and how we can respond as a non-clinician since we were just students. We would take this information and resources that were given to us through this training program and repackage it as infographics and sew it into information that we provide on Hannah Baker's vignette. Besides information on how to assist a friend that might be going through something heartbreaking like the characters in 13 Reasons Why, we also broke down what should have been done with Hannah Baker if a mental health professional had seen her, like what type of assessments they should have given, what type of problems she was experiencing, signs of depression, and even what a diagnostic interview would look like and questions that Mr. Porter, the school counselor who talked to her, should have asked her and should have led the conversation, as well as examples of what he should not have said before she died by suicide. So this audience for this clinical vignette is for help-seeking youth that I previously talked about. You can equate this clinical vignette for Hannah Baker as peanut butter for the pill, which is an analogy drawn from dogs that you have to give a pill to from the vet, and the vet usually tells you to put peanut butter around it so they'll take it thinking it's just a treat. That's why we try to cover topics that are hot or popular or has a cult following that is widely talked about, because we know that that's going to be generating a lot of searches, and since it's going to be generating a lot of searches, it's going to get a lot of views. I don't think it's just a fluke that our Hannah Baker vignette is one of our most viewed pages that HGAPS has ever made, because there's a lot of people out there searching for that content as opposed to other pages that we have that is written in a more clinical or academic way, like evidence-based assessment of depression in youth. That's going to be harder for teenagers or high schoolers to come across that, because that's not the type of content they're looking for or searching for, even though it's what ultimately we want their eyes to land on. This is also appropriate for mental health professionals like Mr. Porter, who might not have the tools or given the training, or might even be in over their head, like camp counselors or people who want to help people like Hannah Baker, like friends or family. In later episodes, like in other seasons, you often hear the friends and family lament over the fact that if they only knew this was a warning sign. We talk about and break down in What We Wish They Knew page, as well as Hannah Baker vignette, so that if anybody comes across these warning signs, can actually act before it's too late.